Welcome to the Caresoft Data Center Innovation Series, where we dive into the trends and issues shaping the future of data centers in the public sector. I'm your host, Caresoft Consulting CTO Scott Robon. Today, we're going to focus on storage and next generation data centers, and we're thrilled to have Jim Cosby, NetApp CTO for Public Sector and Partners, joining us to talk about what he's seeing across his engagements in public sector and U.S. federal data center activity. As we see the continued explosive growth of the role of the data center, we know that storage plays an increasingly understated yet critical role. All the data that's generated and all the data that's used needs to go somewhere. And you might not think about it due to the abundance of storage space today compared to even 5 or 10 years ago. You don't have to worry about your hard drive upgrade like you did way back when. But it's only become a more critical piece of IT infrastructure. Storage has adapted to all sorts of cloud deployment models, private, public, and hybrid, and it's a critical enabler for the AI ecosystem. Jim is going to take us through quite a bit of this today. So Jim, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show. Can you give listeners a little bit on your background and how you got into your role at NetApp?
Sure, Scott. Thank you so much for having me today. I've actually been with NetApp for a little over 20 years now and have a variety of backgrounds, primarily around data and data management, but also security of data. And I've had a variety of roles as well. I was a solutions engineer that helped design and install and build data systems and think about security around that for many years. I was actually an SE leader and ran a team of 3 managers and about 40 people at one point, and really enjoyed helping others learn the craft of data and data security and how to properly configure it, size it, sell it so that it works and secures everything. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I hopped into the CTO role, which I'm really enjoying because it helps get me closer to the real problem and challenges that customers have. And that's what I do with NetApp today. I help customers understand where NetApp's data-centric security and intelligent data infrastructure capabilities come in. So glad to be here. Thanks.
I love your reference to the craft work of IT. And you're very familiar with it in the storage space. I think others that come from network, compute, application development. There is a certain level of engagement at a craft worker level, and we see that very up close and personal in our careers. So like it just resonated with me. Not necessarily anything we need to dive on, but appreciate you calling it out that way. So.
Yeah, you bet.
So you had a really good framework for thinking about the conversation today. You have multiple pillars that you like to talk about. Why don't you give us an overview of that framework for the storage discussion?
Sure. There's probably 3 main areas I would bring up today that we see people trying to manage data in the industry and do things with that. And the first one would be a high level, what I mentioned earlier, the data infrastructure. Scratch that. I'm messing it up myself. Back up. All right. Yeah, the first one would be in the intelligent data infrastructure area. And that's going to be bringing intelligence to the data, making the data do more with less while keeping it secure, right? So that's going to be able to have that data in any location where the applications are, where the users are, where the mission needs to execute and do that well. Another second pillar that we'll probably talk a little more about would be cyber resilience and ransomware. Sometimes we call that CyRes. That seems to be paramount in everybody's mind today with the proliferation of attacks happening daily and everywhere. We've got to make sure that data is secure. And then another big point of conversation around data is artificial intelligence, or AI. And everybody's trying to figure out how to leverage the data they have and get the most out of that in a short amount of time or a shorter amount of time. And that's what AI is all about. So those are probably 3 of the main ones, Scott.
So we'll keep everybody hanging for the AI topic at the end. Let's just go in the order that you took us through. In terms of modernization and cloud transformation, what are you seeing from a storage perspective there? I gave a little hint of working across cloud models, but it's much more than that.
It is. It is. If you think about cloud probably coming out in the mid 2000 range, 2005-ish time, 15, 20 years ago, there was a lot of interest in cloud because for years we built these brick and mortar data centers on premise. And that involves a lot of cost and time and effort and people to manage that. And so when people and agencies and government agencies and companies started to utilize uh, the on-prem IT capabilities, they started building these as a service capabilities in cloud. And when it first came out, there were some mandates. The government saw this and said, hey, this sounds great. If I can, if you look at your electric bill as a utility in your home, and if I can pay the electric company $100 or $200 a month, that's a lot cheaper than spending 50 or $100,000 in the backyard to build a power plant, right? And then having
Right.
to amortize that for 20 years. So a lot of the government agencies came up with what they call cloud first. And they started just putting everything in cloud, thinking it was going to be the best way, cheaper, more secure, and everything. Um, they found out later that to a point, there's a lot of value in cloud, but they had to revise that. And now the new initiative is called Cloud Smart. And that's where they analyze what you have, look at what needs to go in cloud, and then put it in the right place. But the good news is, if you think about the intelligent data infrastructure that I mentioned with NetApp, we have that capability to help those customers have those brick and mortar data centers and do more with less there. You can also run our software, it's called Data on Tap, on other people's servers and storage and tie them into this data management architecture. And you find data on tap from NetApp and all the major cloud providers like Amazon, Azure, Google, as a first party and a third party service. So now you have that freedom to take that data to any location you want to, and you have a true hybrid multi-cloud capability. So, very high level, but looking down, those were some of the histories of cloud and where it went and where it is. It's still growing, like
Sure.
it's everywhere, and it will continue to grow, and it's getting better and better. But no matter where the customer wants to go, whether it is cloud or on-prem or have a combination, we need to support that. And there are multiple mandates from not only companies but the government around that. If you look at Department of Defense, they have programs called JWCC or JADC2. These
Sure.
are joint all-domain programs where Army, Air Force, Navy, Space Force, Marine Corps, they want to be able to share data on-prem and across all of the cloud locations. And they're making that a requirement and stating what clouds it needs to be in. So you need to be able to support that for the mission, the business, the sake of the country, and getting things done efficiently.
You go back to the cloud first initiative early on, right? And I saw it with government, and I actually saw it with telcos based on my employment at the time, and saw that hesitancy. How are you going to force me to trust other people's infrastructure, with my sensitive data, my sensitive applications? And, not to paint the government as monolithic, there are all sorts of different types of security concerns there too. But one of the first use cases that started to persuade me was rendering imagery from Mars missions. You don't want to maintain all the data center infrastructure, all the storage infrastructure for all that imagery all the time, especially when it only happens, on certain missions. So that bursting into the cloud capability kind of made sense to me. And I think, started to wear away at others that, led to uh, people being more comfortable putting data and applications in the cloud. Um, you fast forward to today, and the emergence of hybrid, and the little drumbeat of cloud repatriation. You do have to be able to support moving that data around wherever the customer wants it. I don't know if have you seen any real impact from the repatriation discussion at this point, or has it really just been an analysis piece for you so far?
Yeah, there is some, and there's some activity around that as well. And it comes down to how much data, what's their mission, how much compute power do they need? Do they have the compute power on premise, or is the
Right.
compute power cheaper and more readily available in cloud? So I don't know that there's an exact, one size fits all answer.
Sure.
But over the past few years, data is proliferating and growing more and more every day. But 5 to 8 years ago, I was talking to CIOs and CTOs, and there was a 20 or 30% of them that were looking at cloud going, we have a lot of stuff in cloud, but we've got like multiple dozens of petabytes that it's really expensive in cloud. And we still
Sure.
have our brick and mortar data centers. So we're trying to get that 10 or 20% out and put it back on prem because we can just do that cheaper than having it in cloud. And now in the last 2 or 3 years, I think that 10 or 20% is might even be in that 30%
Hmm.
or 40%, where more people are realizing what they have in cloud because they've gotten in, they think it's great, and you need to analyze what you have before you do that.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the things NetApp does really well around that is a service design workshop. It's a zero
Mm.
cost assessment we perform for customers where we put some software on a virtual machine to analyze all of their compute servers and their data infrastructure. It'll talk to all servers and storage, not just NetApp. And after a couple of weeks, we come back and look at that and say, here's where your workload is. Here's where your data is. This might make sense to put in cloud. This might make sense to keep on-prem. But it is the best way to figure out what you have before you just start moving things around because you think it'll work. This will let you know it'll work.
What a wonderful idea. Do a little planning and analysis before you make actually deployment decisions. I applaud that for sure. Uh,
Exactly.
yep. Well, and that's aligned with Cloud Smart, right? Trying to figure out what workloads belong where and what data goes best where. I mean, I haven't ever been involved with the program you just talked about, but it seems like that would be a huge supporting piece of analysis for Cloud Smart type analysis.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, our partners in the cloud, even Amazon has a service that they perform, and they use the same software that comes from us to do
Sure.
their service design workshop because it works so well. So we have ongoing, continually 2 or 3 or 4 of these going all the time, and a team of folks that are doing these for a variety of locations. And people have really found that it saves them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of time and investment over, by doing the pre-work ahead.
Yeah, very smart.
Yeah,
Well, let's migrate to if I'm using the right terminology, the CyRes bucket, cyber resilience. In the industry, I think you and I can probably point out too many examples of not thinking security first, whether it's in storage or whether it's in any other IT domain. And in the conversations that you and I have had, I've been really impressed with, security is part of the story on day one. It's not a separate thing. So take that and talk about, the things that are on top of mind for you from a data and storage and product perspective for security.
sure. Yeah, I think one of the first things that people don't think about, and they should, because naturally we think about firewalls, passwords, encryption, things
Right.
like that. But how do you know what to protect? I mean, you kind of want to protect everything, but some things might need more security than others. Some things might need to have rules because it's the CEO's personal diary versus just, a sensitive document for the organization.
Sure.
So that gets into knowing what data you have first. And that's what I call classification. I think that is one of the most important things that any customer can do is look at all their data and classify what they have to understand, is it personal? Is it sensitive? Is it mission related? Before you start to protect it, before you start to build out your rules around things like governance and compliance that dictate what happens with the data, where it can go, where it can't. So NetApp has a classification service, and it's for use at no extra cost. If you buy NetApp storage, you can run our classification service, and it will look at structured and unstructured data and analyze where it is, and it'll look for common things like PII or PCI or HIPAA, healthcare information, SEC data. In the European world, there's GDPR, which is one of the
Hmm.
European regulations. In California, there's the California Citizens Privacy Act, CCPA. It'll look for all those types of common concerns, and you can also give it custom search patterns. So let's say that Carosoft is a sensitive word in your data, and you want to know where it is everywhere, then you can tell it to look for that. And at the end of what it does, it builds out a location of each volume, whether it's in cloud, whether it's on-prem, and gives you kind of a red, green, yellow information on it. Yellow is sensitive. I need to maybe do something red. I need to either delete it or encrypt it or change permissions. And green means it's fine, but it'll help you build that baseline of what you have. It'll also help you get rid of redundant data or rot. Sometimes people call that rot because it's redundant, obsolete, and trivial, hence the ROT acronym. And
Right.
some customers have saved 50% of their capacity by running our classification service and doing that. And then the other thing it does, it alerts you to data change. Once you know what you have and what you want to do, is it alerts you when the data is changing so you can take action if you need to. And then one other thing, it filters data before you put it into your AI models, which we'll talk more about in a minute.
Sure.
But if you let garbage get into your AI models, they can put garbage out, or that's known as hallucination, and you get bad results back, right?
Right.
So classify what you have first, and then start to back that up and make sure you can recover it. And that's where NetApp's snapshots come in, which are pointer-based copies of data that happen in 1 or 2 seconds because we don't move data blocks around to take these snapshots.
Hmm.
And you can have them run automatically or run them manually. You can have them hourly, nightly, weekly. And it gives you these data points to literally go back and recover my Carosoft.txt file from 1 hour ago or 1 week ago. And I just copy it out of a folder. And it's built into the storage with NetApp.
Right.
I don't need extra software from another company or different technology. And then you can tie that into not only backup and recovery, but disaster recovery from one
Sure.
site to another. So that snapshot rolls into what we call snap mirror, and you can mirror the data and the snapshots to another location. So if you have a site outage, you roll to another site in a second or a minute, and you're up and running. You can sync back the changes and so forth, right? That's where NetApp's been doing that really well for over 25 years around backup and recovery. We even tie that into enterprise applications on premise and in cloud. So your Microsoft apps like Exchange or SharePoint, SQL, your Oracle, your SAP HANA, your VMware, your Red Hat, all your server client virtualization, that can
Sure.
be backed up with our Snap Center application in seconds or minutes. So we've got a very strong way, and customers need to do this to understand what they have. Then they want that plan B option to know where they can recover. And you want to have a plan C and a plan D and so on and have
Sure.
multiple ways to recover because one of them may not work, right? So that's on the backup recovery side. And then if you start to look at the ransomware side, NetApp has built in an autonomous ransomware protection or ARP capability, and it learns when users access files normally, over time, maybe Monday through Friday, but it's Saturday at 2 a.m. They start backing up data or touching data and they shouldn't. Well, we can take one of those snapshots in 1 or 2 seconds, and we've got a backup before they deleted the data, before
Sure.
they put that WannaCry virus in there, right? So you've got backup recovery built into the data, and that can also be tied into our BlueXP ransomware protection service, which ties in all the things we've mentioned, our snapshots, our Snap Mirror, our Snap Center, the autonomous ransomware protection, and it automates the backup and recovery, and it'll ask you, hey, Scott, you just had somebody put a virus in a file over here. Do you want to recover that from an hour ago? If yes, click here. If not, you can go fix it on your own. But that Cyrez portfolio or capabilities is one of the things that we're really, really focusing on today. And I didn't mention certifications, but NetApp has a long list of some of the strongest certifications in the industry today. Uh, Things like common criteria, things like a DISA STIG, things like FIPS certification, which the new ones are 140-2, 140-3. We have both. And then one of the latest ones we have is from NSA, National Security Agency, called CSFC, which is Commercial Solutions for Classified Environments. And that's where the NSA agency has certified NetApp being commercial equipment to properly and safely store top secret data. And NetApp's the only company to have that CSFC certification. None of our competitors have it anywhere else. So you have that strong capability with CyberRes built in, not only to protect, but to make sure you can recover, back up and recover, right?
Little shout out to the CSFC program, right? That's been a really innovative way to take largely off the shelf solutions with certain, certifications and layer them together to provide secure solutions, right? And
Right.
that's one of the smartest things in government that I've seen in a long time, right? In terms of trying to accelerate the adoption of technology, for federal purposes with maintaining the most stringent security requirements. So glad you brought that up. You've kind of hinted, Jim, at the uh, data hygiene issues on parts of the users. Very graciously, you didn't call any out, but I feel a little guilty when you talk about deduplication, and think about how many versions of a file I save that have only minor incremental changes, and I'm not really good with track changes in Word, or just make another copy so I have a whole copy of the changes. That deduplication activity has got to be super helpful. And I forget the number you called out, the space savings just from deduplication activities. Is
Yeah,
that
that's a good one. That ties back in a little bit to the intelligent data infrastructure, right? And
sure?
that efficiency there is the deduplication, compression, compaction, and tiering of that data. We can tier out hot blocks or cold blocks, rather, of data out to a lower cost medium, like an object target. We have object storage on-prem, we call that storage grid, or you can tier it out to the cloud. A lot of customers are putting it up into, for example, Amazon S3 or Azure Blob
Sure.
or Google Object. And the mileage may vary, but in those PowerPoint files, Scott, like you talk about, or Word,
Right.
or if you look at VMware data, right? How much data is duplicated with a virtual
Hmm.
machine? Well, if it's the same copy of Windows Server 2019, 10 times,
Sure.
98% of it's the same, except for a host name and an IP address, for
Right.
example,
Right.
right? So we usually see 20 or 30% savings when we deduplicate customers' data.
Okay.
But in the virtualization world where like VMware is there, we can see 80 or 90%
Sure. Yeah.
savings. And people find that hard to believe. But literally, you see that through our management tools, like Blue XP is
Hmm.
one I mentioned a minute ago. It has an IT canvas that will show you all of your data volumes in all of the locations in cloud, on-prem, and each one of them you can drill down on, and it'll tell you the efficiency ratio, right? It's a 10
Sure.
terabyte volume. And guess what? It's storing 6 terabytes of data. And guess what? It's only using 1.75 terabytes of capacity, right? And
Right.
that's fascinating to know that about your data everywhere. But that's another great benefit. I appreciate you bringing that up because NetApp is really about that efficiency, right? Under intelligent data infrastructure.
Well, that is, a blessing and a curse of virtual machines, right? A VM is a big hammer, right? I have a whole copy of the OS in a VM. But again, if you can detect that and keep a common image pointed to somewhere and not have to have it in every, all 10 copies or all 100 copies or all 1,000 copies, obviously you can get huge savings there. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
very cool. Well, let's move on to, the topic that every podcast has to talk about, artificial intelligence, machine learning. um, you know Many people probably don't understand the critical role of storage in model training and all other aspects of AI usage. Why don't you give us a little like background on that, and then we can go through some of the details.
Sure. Sure. So, the human brain and human mind are incredible and have been for thousands of years. Um, and what I mean by that is you and I think and we cover data points in our brain and our mind in seconds because we've got multiple years of background to build those decisions on, those data on, whether it's 30 years or 50 or 70 years. And the point is that we have all that learned data from being a baby to a child, the whole crawl, walk, run capabilities. So
Sure.
therefore, we can see something happen or learn something, and you might have 99 elements out of 100 already pre-learned. And now you only need to know that one other point, and you just put the whole picture together and solve the puzzle, right? But for computers, if you turn them off and turn them on, they're net new. They're that baby, right?
Right.
They've got to learn all 100 steps. So with AI, that's what they call data learning and machine learning. How do you teach them those 99 steps? How long does it take? Where do you have to do that? Is it on premise? Is it in cloud, right? And I'm way oversimplifying what's going on in
Sure. Sure.
right? There's billions and billions of operations a second happening with AI and big, large compute systems in cloud and on-prem. But the point is, the faster you can get those 99 things done, you're going to really save time. So NetApp has, with our storage, the capability to make point-in-time copies. We talked about snapshots.
Hmm.
Well, those are read-only copies, but we can also clone a copy, or we call it a flex clone, but we clone a snapshot or a data volume and we make a writable snapshot. And
Mm.
now I can leverage the 99 things that you did for the last 99 years or 10 years, and now I can make writes to that data, but I only write out new incremental 4K change data blocks at a time. So
Mm.
I can now do that one out of 100 things in seconds or minutes instead of days, hours or days that it took to learn the 99, right? So to oversimplify this, we have a customer today that was spending 52 hours copying data around from one system to another. That's a
Sure.
couple of days. And then after a couple of days, they would turn on the system, the application that is, and run it and do their machine learning, data learning algorithm. Well, now with NetApp and Flex clones, they're creating those copies of the data in 6 seconds. And now they're cutting the machine on and processing the rest. So instead of 52 hours, they're now doing in 6 seconds what takes that long to do that. So that's one of the ways that NetApp can help with AI, is that expediting and time versioning of data. And that's a big benefit as well. When you look into other applications out there, there's a lot of technology companies for machine learning, data learning, for GPUs, the graphical processing units like NVIDIA. I think most everybody knows them. We partner
Sure.
with them and the other companies, and we have pre-built solutions out there now. So whether you're building, another term, maybe large language models, we have
Hmm.
high-speed, large storage platforms for doing that. That's usually parallel file systems. We've partnered with NVIDIA with their big GPU servers and our
Sure.
NVMe storage, and we have what are called AI pods or super pods. Then you can get into the machine learning and data learning and leverage our data on tap flash systems or spinning drive or hybrid systems and our storage grid object storage. All of this supplements and feeds into the learning, the referencing. And then when you get into things like, the new term is RAG, or remote augmentation um, infrastructure, that gives you the ability with NetApp to tie into all the existing data that you have, and then index that to know what you have, right?
Right.
So, for example, Jensen Huang was at GTC 2 years ago. He mentioned NetApp on stage in California, and he actually said, half the world's file data lives on NetApp infrastructure today.
Mm.
And everyone should leverage that where they can. And that's where RAG comes in, with that ability to connect in what you have tied into your indexing and learning. So just the raw capacity and performance, the backup and recovery, the time versioning of data. And then the last part, tying in AI. What if you want to run your AI applications in cloud? What if you have them on-prem? Well, that gets back to the intelligent data infrastructure. NetApp can take that data on-prem, replicate it to cloud, and now you can run it with whatever you want to in cloud, or vice versa, right? All while being security. To go back and touch on our second topic, we can do all of this
Sure.
encrypted at rest, encrypted during transit, and greatly enhance the security of your AI processes too.
Well, not to oversimplify this too much and unpack this a little if you want, but the with all the focus and expense on GPUs and the systems to house the GPUs, and wanting to keep those GPUs cracking, right, 100% utilized during model training, the the ability to not slip backwards if there's a network error, if I have packets lost that interrupt the training cycle, if I can do those very rapid snaps and backups, you reduce the probability of having to fully start model retraining. Right. And I think that's a huge benefit. That's a part of the AI model training system that storage plays that most people don't have an appreciation for.
That is a great point, Scott. It really is a paramount important point, and it has to do with AI, and it also has to do with just general data integrity. Because if you run your DLML model, let's say it's 8:30 a.m., you could have taken a snapshot of that data at 8 a.m., and hopefully you did before you make your changes.
Right.
Let's say that when you ran that model, somehow it injected a virus and modified all the data, either with a virus, a WannaCry, or something. An error went by, and you just corrupted 200 terabytes of data in a matter of minutes.
Yep.
What are your choices to get that back? Well, you could go back to last night's tapes or other storage and take probably hours, if not days, to recover that. But if you have a snapshot or a flex clone with NetApp, we can revert, because remember, we just move pointers for reference to data.
Right.
We don't move the blocks. I can take that volume of 200 terabytes and in 2 seconds revert that back to 8 a.m. and you have all of your data back at 8 a.m. Right? So that would undo the corruption. It would undo the ransomware attack. It would save hours and days, which ties into business execution, mission
Yep.
execution, saving lives, finding the cure for whatever disease there is, you name it, right?
Yep.
But thank you for bringing that up, because that time versioning of data to be able to recover, and then let's say 8 a.m. is the gold certified copy. Guess what else we can do with that? I can make 5 or 10 copies of that with the Flex clones and give it to 5 or 10 other data scientists. And
Mm,
now that we cured a kidney disease, they can go look for the next cure to cure a liver disease based on the tie to the kidney, right? I mean, think about what it could do. It's
yeah.
limitless.
Really is amazing.
Yeah.
On the data classification front, from your discussion earlier on identifying types of data, one of the other really important issues for model training is really good quality data. And this is you inserted the data engineer, data scientist into the conversation here, right? We garbage in, garbage out. If I have bad input data into my model training, I'm going to have bad results from model output. What have you seen, and what are you doing on enabling data scientists and others to help them clean up the quality of their data for model training?
Yeah, Scott, that would tie in as well. We talked about that classification service early on.
Right.
And one of the things it can do is help cleanse that data and filter in, filter out what you have before you put it into your models and build it in with your DL and ML processing. So the data classification service is used in a lot of cases, especially when the solutions are bundled, like our AI Pod, SuperPod with NVIDIA. We can tie into their Omniverse solutions, cards, and things like that. And our classification service, again, can help filter down and get more accurate data in a more timely fashion. But that ties into AI as well, is the data classification service to help do that.
Right. Lots more we could talk about there for sure. I want to take us back to the backup and recovery and DR world for a little bit. We we don't like to think about tape backups anymore. We don't even like to think about hard drives. But we still have basic requirements, right, for removable media and immutable copies of stuff. What are you seeing from the holistic, 321 type solutions where you've got the working storage, you've got copies that can be brought off site, and then maybe even back up to tape media? Is that still pretty common, or what what's happening with that part of the plain old data backup world these days?
Yeah, that 321 is interesting. That typically refers to 3 copies of your data with at least 2 backup copies and one of them off-site. And that is what I meant earlier by, you want your primary data, but you want that plan B,
Yep.
you want that plan C. You want to be able to recover no matter where you are. Um, and NetApp has those capabilities, but to your point, what about people trying to corrupt or infect the backups as well
Sure.
as the primary?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, some customers have had experiences where attackers have gotten into their environment 6 or 9 months or a year and they never knew it.
And
And
the
if they're
backups
really,
are already corrupted and you just never knew it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're infected, ransomware attacked them. But worse than that, they get in, they turn off notifications for
Mm,
the system so the users don't know what's happening with the storage system. They'll go in and delete their backups or their snapshots, right? Then they'll encrypt and infect the primary data, and then they ransom the customer. They don't have any choice but to pay if they want to get that data back.
right.
Um, One of the ways to prevent that is with indelible and immutable storage, right? So NetApp has a technology called Snap Lock, and we also have Snap Lock snapshots where we can make the snapshots indelible and immutable, but the active data is writable. But either way, if you turn this on with based on a compliance clock, there's no way the data can be changed until that clock expires, right?
Mm,
And by the way, our storage competitors, they all have an administrative backdoor login. So if they were to lock the data that's backed up, the administrator on the system could undo that, right?
mm,
NetApp gives you two choices. The enterprise mode would give you administrator authority to override. But if you go in compliance mode, there's no backdoor. And that way, that data is locked until that clock expires. Why is that important? Because if you back up your data to a snap lock volume on NetApp, there's no way it can change. It's basically a worm or write once, read many
hmm.
technology. And now you have a guaranteed way to recover that data because nobody can change it. The insider, the outsider, the attacker, nobody, right? So that is a very hot topic, and a lot of customers are interested in that. And in fact, NetApp offers today a ransomware recovery guarantee using that technology. So our professional services can come in and set up a SnapLock volume for backup and recovery, and we'll guarantee that customer for 12 months at a time that you'll be able to recover your data, or NetApp pays litigation and damages. So that's
Wow.
how well it works. That's how strong it is. There is no backdoor. So it's one of the hottest topics out there.
I can see a setting of a spy or espionage movie where someone has corrupted the data and the crack PS team has to come in and we've got music playing in the background and the stress of people trying to solve the problem. But anyway, sorry to go Hollywood on you there. But well, as we wind this down, anything else you want to bring highlight to, Jim? Anything that I've missed that you think is really important for listeners on like what's coming next for storage and what to watch for?
Yeah, I just might mention quantum cryptography.
Hmm.
That is another looming threat. And quantum computing is here today. It's getting massively powerful and scalable and so on. A lot of the encryption algorithms we use today, like AES 256 and things like that, have not been cracked that we're aware of. But customers should start thinking about that because a lot of the quantum computing is getting so much stronger per day, per year, per month that attackers now are looking at warehousing customers' data, even if it's encrypted. They want to steal your data and encrypt it, stick it in their location, their warehouse, and then use quantum computing to crack the encryption. If it takes them a month or 6 months, whatever, they'll go back and do it
Right.
later, right?
Yep.
So customers need to be looking at that. And there's a couple of things that come top of mind. One is NIST has just come out with the two new regulations, FIPS, or three of them, excuse me, FIPS 203, 204, and 205.
Hmm.
NetApp just announced a month ago that we have incorporated those capabilities into our data on tap software, right? Um, so it's kind of has an acronym in industry, PQC, post quantum cryptography. So
Right.
we're building in the PQC elements into data on tap to protect customers' data. So if you invest with NetApp today, you're going to have that protection to protect you down the road. And then the other thing we use around that would be the CSFC certification. Why?
Hmm.
Because that was what the NSA designed, but it uses dual layer AES 256 encryption. So it uses a FIP certified hard drive or flash drive, right?
Hmm.
That's going to be 140-2 level 2 or 140-3. And it uses volume encryption on that encrypted drive. And that's going to be FIPS 140-2 level 1 or a variant of 140-3. The point is, if an attacker goes through AES 256, they are now looking at the hard drive that's encrypted. They don't know what they have.
Right.
Because even though they cracked it, they're looking at encrypted data everywhere, and they can't tell what it is. So I call that security by obscurity.
Sure.
And it's you can't see the forest for the trees because you don't know what's what, right? So
Yeah.
that's another way you can employ to have protection against quantum computing as well. Yeah, but that would be something to maybe think about for customers going forward.
For sure. And I think I made a bit of a pivot on this sometime last year, 2024, where I think you could argue that quantum computing still has a way to go from stability and usability perspective. And while that may be true, we could see major leaps forward, anytime now. And because of the time it takes to get quantum safe crypto algorithms out in the field, like approved through NIST into software that gets deployed on systems, now's the time to be thinking about it anyway, right? So you can't, you ever must be ever vigilant, with the potential, new power that quantum computing will bring for breaking crypto algorithms, for sure.
Yes,
So
great point. Yeah, you got to be prepared to be thinking about that future because you don't know how quick it's going to come. But if you start now, you'll be ahead of that time if and when it comes. Yeah.
increases the probability that you will, for sure. Well, look, this has been a great conversation. At Carasoft, we appreciate the partnership with NetApp and the joint events that we do and the conversations that we have like this. Last word to like let you uh, give people any pointers on how they want to follow up with more info on NetApp, or you personally, where would you direct people?
Yeah, we have a nice website, netapp.com. And if you wanted to check out our Blue XP software, by the way, that's something that's also no charge with NetApp. You can see that at bluexp.netapp.com, and you can create a free account and start using that there. I can be reached at jim.cosby@netapp.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can look me up there. I try to stay active in those locations, but probably email if you want to get me direct and quicker is a better way. But yeah, just everyone stay safe. Think about your data. Start deploying data-centric security with intelligent data infrastructure today. And if you do that, you should be in a good shape, a good position for the future, no matter what your business or your application, and make sure it's safe and happening when it needs to. So, yeah.
Well, Jim Cosby of NetApp, thanks so much for coming on today. We appreciate you and NetApp's partnership with Carasoft. And listeners, thank you all for tuning in, and be on the lookout for more episodes coming in the Carasoft Data Center Innovation Series. Thanks very much. We'll talk to you soon.